If we want to build the carbon or build the organic matter and the fertility in the soil, then not only have we got to build the carbon, but you have to build the nitrogen as well. And so where does that nitrogen come from? It can either come out of the bag, and that's costly, or it can come from the legumes, and that's a much cheaper option in grazing systems. The major thing that comes out of the trial is the importance of legumes in our pasture and grazing systems. Their capacity to build the nitrogen is so important. From 2 points of view, the legumes contribute the nitrogen to the grasses. Probably they're contributing about 1.5 kilos for every 100 kilos of legume that you've got in the pasture. The second thing, of course, so important about the legumes is that the cattle are selectively grazing the legume, and so they're getting the extra protein, and that then benefits their live weight gain and hence the economic returns that farmers can get from their paddocks.
This project, we were converting old cropping land to a pasture which incorporated a legume to see if we could come up with some numbers that actually said we were viable, said whether we could pay the bills or not. That's what I was trying to achieve, to see whether it was a sustainable little operation.
At Colliery Park there were 2 paddocks. One was sown in 2007 to a mix of grasses and legumes. No, well, the legume was lucerne. And the other paddock was sown to a mix of grasses that included Premier digit grass, Bisset creeping bluegrass, Gatton panic, and lucerne. Both those 2 paddocks, what I call the old pasture, sown in 2007, and the new pasture sown in 2012, had plenty of legume. They had lots of lucerne growing in them, and they were quite productive. But this year, and in fact whenever I've measured them over the last 3 years, the newer pasture has been more productive and grown more grass and legume than the old pasture. So the legumes actually put in there to try and reduce the rundown.
What we often notice with sown pastures, when they're planted after cultivation particularly, is that in the first couple of years of growth, they grow much better. They're excellent in the first couple of years, and then with time they run down. Now, that's reflecting really the changing nitrogen conditions in the soil, and hence the value of the legumes, that they can continue supplying the pasture with nitrogen.
Legumes form an association with rhizobium bacteria, and those bacteria can take the nitrogen from the atmosphere. The rhizobium grow nodules. They exist on the roots of legumes. They do a swap of those nitrogen compounds, nitrates, with the legume they're growing on. So they swap the nitrates for energy in return. And so that allows the legume to grow a higher quality, higher nitrogen, higher protein amount of forage.
The value of legumes, of course, has been known for a long time. And there are many producers, and there's thousands of square kilometres of land in northern Australia that have been planted with legumes. The challenge that we've got with legumes is, firstly, how do you get them established in the soil? It's very dependent on seasonal conditions and the way in which you prepare and plant the legumes. And then secondly, the grazing pressure is so important. There's always a tendency to increase that grazing pressure, increase the number of animals per hectare that you're grazing. But in so doing, that puts extra pressure on the legume. And so there's a challenge in maintaining the legumes in the pasture.
If you get more legume growing in the pasture, you can actually get higher production from that pasture and higher organic matter in the soil. The cattle do better because they gain the benefit of grazing the legume, which is higher protein in the first place. But the grasses growing with those legumes actually get some of that nitrogen that's cycled back into the system, they can soak that up and they're higher in protein as well. So in the end, with legumes, we get higher productivity, high protein and high carbon in the soil.
The main learning was that the system's not sustainable without a legume. I believe that. This backed it up. A number of different sites that we've got continually prove it, so that's one main learning. The numbers that have come out of it are very similar to where I put my figures, the figures that I was targeting. So I think that was a pretty good result. The computer modelling, I don't disagree with at all.